Just waiting for people to join. Okay. Since I put this link up a little later, I'm going to wait one more minute. So, building on the previous ruminations, you have this precious human body. You have this precious human mind. You're free from these unbelievable conditions of suffering, heat, cold, hunger, thirst, a mind and body that don't work, wrong views, being born at a time when these teachings aren't available. And you have the opposite of all those. You have a body and mind that work. You have a time when the Buddha came. People have taught supportive community to help you. In addition to that, you now have some experience, some taste that there's a part of you that really is, regardless of religion, teaching, blah, 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 that really is pure, good, virtue, that isn't touched by all of your negative actions from your life. And that as soon as you leave that state and come back to a relatively ordinary frame of mind, bliss, the desire to do good, right, immediately comes from this mind. So that isn't quite yet your Buddha nature, but we're getting closer, much closer. And so the very best you've done at getting deep, 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 deep inside yourself, what you've found is goodness and purity and bliss, right? And that's how it is for everyone, everywhere. That's how it is for all beings, whether in the lowest rebirth or the highest rebirth, the lowest station in human life, the highest station in human life, whether it's the Dalai Lama himself, or the Buddha himself, or it's the most despicable human being, the political figure that you hate the most. Exactly the same. The worst figures from history, exactly the same. So, now let's work on enhancing this feeling of equality. So just to give you a little bit, try to maintain a bit of the equality you've built up, right? This feeling that, oh, wow, everyone has the same fundamental qualities of mind, right? At least we're all the same in that way, regardless of what we've done. And that fundamental nature isn't touched by any of the negativity they've done in the same way it's not touched by your negativity, right? So starting from there, if you want to have a universal, genuine concern for how it turns out for others, in other words, metta, loving kindness, if you want to have absolutely universal loving kindness, first you have to see, at least in some way, all beings as completely equal. Otherwise, your love will be conditional, not unconditional. Otherwise, your love will be aimed at those you think are deserving of your love, and it won't be aimed at those you think are undeserving. So the first step in this process of building up universal loving kindness is the development of this feeling of equality. So we've started down that road by looking at our own fundamental nature and realizing, oh wow, it's pure, it's untouched by negativity, and it's the same for others. Furthermore, consider that, well, no, we don't need to do that. Let's stay on track. So we need to develop equanimity. It's called equanimity in the sense that we see all categories of beings as the same in terms of at least some kind of fundamental quality. So consider this. You want happiness, right? Isn't that true? That you want happiness, even if you don't know what it is and how to get there, that you want to be happy? That's true, right? And you don't want to experience unnecessary suffering, at least, let's say. Any kind of suffering that isn't necessary or meaningful, you don't want to experience. Yeah? And yet, when you look at other beings, is it any different? So think of a good friend of yours, right? Someone you really care about. Don't they also want happiness? They also want to be free from meaningless suffering. That's true, right? So get that feeling that you and your friend are completely equal in terms of wanting happiness and wanting to be free from meaningless suffering. Right? So do you have that feeling of equality? That in terms of that desire, that fundamental desire that you were born with, you're the same. So in terms of your fundamental purity of consciousness, and in terms of your desire at this sort of ordinary level of experience to be happy and to be free from meaningless suffering, you're the same. So now a little bit more of a challenge. Think of a stranger, someone you don't know. Maybe you saw them on the street recently, or you talked to them on the phone, or something that, like a salesperson called you, or, think of a stranger, someone where you don't really care how it turns out for them in life. Okay, you have someone specific in mind? So isn't it true that that person has a fundamental pure consciousness just like yours? The potential for possibly infinite spiritual growth, bliss, just like you? Isn't it true that that person has a deep innate desire from birth to be happy just like you? Exactly the same. Isn't it true that they have a deep innate desire from birth to be free from meaningless suffering? Just like you, isn't that true? Exactly the same. Isn't it true also that their innate desire for happiness and freedom from meaningless suffering, isn't it exactly the same as your good friend or the person you care about? Isn't it exactly the same? If it strikes you finally that, wow, even that stranger, it's exactly the same as me, it's exactly the same as this person I care about, we're all equal. If that strikes you, if that attitude hits you as a real palpable thing, again, filling up the body, then let yourself marinate in that feeling, that attitude. Equal. And now think of someone who you don't like, who you actually would prefer if things didn't go well for them, or who it annoys you when you notice that good things are happening for them. This could be a political figure. This could be someone personal in your life. It's probably easier if it's not a complicated dislike, like maybe somebody that they saw you on the street and they looked at you funny or something, not too hardcore. Or maybe a political figure that's on the other side of the aisle, but you don't really know anything about them. And so you just kind of don't like them for some reason, It would annoy you if you saw them doing well, but not really intense hatred. Don't go there yet. So, in exactly the same way, that one you don't like, don't they have the same purity of mind? Their consciousness fundamentally is like your consciousness when you went inside. It's the same, pure, unaffected by their negative actions, unaffected by how they harm others. Isn't it true that their fundamental desire for happiness from birth is exactly like your good friend? That it's exactly like that neutral person? That it's exactly like your desire for happiness from birth? It's exactly the same. Isn't it true that they don't want to experience meaningless suffering? Exactly like that stranger, exactly like your good friend, exactly like you, exactly the same, equal. It doesn't mean you have to approve of their negative actions, but in this way, all equal. In the same way, just as a general category, all of these people that you like and you want to do well, aren't they all the same in terms of having purity of mind, fundamentally? Infinite potential for spiritual growth? Aren't they all the same in terms of wanting happiness and freedom from meaningless suffering? Exactly the same as each other, exactly the same as you. What about infinite numbers of strangers? Aren't they all equal in terms of having pure mind? Aren't they all equal in terms of having infinite spiritual capability? Aren't they all equal in terms of wanting happiness and freedom from meaningless suffering? Exactly the same as your good friends and yourself, as your dear loved ones and yourself. Exactly the same. And now widen out the category of all of these ones that you don't like, that you don't want to do well, that you want to harm. Exactly the same. Infinite spiritual potential, completely pure fundamental mind, intense desire for happiness, intense desire to be free from meaningless suffering, overwhelmed completely, like we all are, by these negative mental states that are on the surface of the mind, just on the surface, but down below, completely pure, unstained. All three categories completely equal in this way. So if you have some attitude of equality coming up for all these categories, the ones you like, the ones you're indifferent towards, and the ones you don't like, equal with each other, equal with you, just marinate in that feeling of equality. You and me, equal. You and your pets, equal. You and your teachers, equal. You and your boss, equal. You and your parents, equal. You and your siblings, equal. You and your friends, equal. You and your enemies, equal. You and the lowest being in the lowest, worst suffering existence in the hell realms, equal. You and the most intense suffering in the hungry ghost realms, overwhelmed with hunger and thirst, equal. You and the most pitiful animal in the unbelievable difficulty suffering, equal. You and every other human being, in this way, infinite spiritual potential, completely pure nature of mind, deep desire for happiness, lasting happiness and satisfaction, and deep desire to be free from meaningless suffering, completely equal. You and every being in the upper realms, if there are deities there, beings in the formless realms and deep states of samadhi, that will eventually fall back down and have to do all this work. Equal. In whatever ways they appear. Equal, 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 equal. When you walk out your door after this retreat, you see someone on the street, equal. When you see an insect on your windowsill, equal. When a mosquito lands on your arm, equal. To enhance this feeling of equality even further, consider this. Even during the span of this lifetime, there's no certainty that specific individuals will always remain as friends, in other words, those people you like and you want to do well, as enemies, in other words, those people that you don't like and you don't want to do well, or as neutral people, in other words, those people about whom you don't care if it goes well or doesn't go well, whether they have success or don't have success, happiness or not. There's no certainty, even in the span of one lifetime, that those categories will remain the same. In other words, your dearest friend can become your worst enemy. Your worst enemy can become your dearest friend. Every friend you have now was once a stranger. Every enemy you have now was once a stranger. Your friends can become strangers. Your enemies can become strangers. These categories are interchangeable even within a single lifetime. And sometimes in a single conversation, they change. Don't they? Equal. So the reactions we feel where we want more happiness for one category and less happiness for another, and don't care how it turns out for another, completely inappropriate. Our reaction should be equal. Importantly, this doesn't mean we treat our wife the same way we treat our dog, or our dog the same way we treat a criminal. So we still need to have rational behavior based on the way that people are acting. You know, if somebody tries to attack you with a sword, block the sword. And don't treat them like you treat your wife or husband or child. But the attitude you have in terms of wanting the one who's attacking you with a sword to be happy should be completely equal to these other categories. The one who tries to steal from you should still be completely equal. Why? Because they have infinite potential for spiritual development. Their mind's completely pure and unstained. They have the same innate desire for happiness. They have the same innate desire to be free from meaningless suffering. And at any time, they could change from being in that category to being a stranger, to being a friend. Ooh. So marinate in the equality with this added layer of understanding that the previous way of interacting, where we didn't have a feeling of equality, made no sense. Furthermore, for those of you who believe in karma and rebirth, think that over many lifetimes, every single being has already had every conceivable relationship with you up to this point. For those of you who don't believe in rebirth, just imagine that in the future, every being you know, every category of person, could conceivably become one of the others. Your dear family member could become your worst enemy. Your worst enemy could become like a dear family member. If time goes by, your dearest friend could become a stranger, unrecognizable to you. And a stranger could become a dear friend or a great enemy, one about whom you wished, right? So these categories are so unstable. So stick with that if you don't believe in rebirth. But if you believe in rebirth, consider that since infinite rebirths in the past, beginningless rebirths. Everyone has been your mother. Everyone's been your father. Everyone's been your sister. Everyone's been your brother. Everyone's been your child. Everyone's been your aunt. Everyone's been your uncle. Everyone's been your boss. Everyone's been your employee. Everyone's been your worst enemy. Everyone's been your murderer. Everyone's been your savior from murder. Everyone has delivered you from every kind of suffering. Everyone has delivered to you every kind of suffering. Constantly changing. Constantly changing. So the attitude that we had up until this moment, where we didn't see them as equal, and instead we had the attitude that I'm going to help those who I like, I don't care about those who I don't know, and I want to harm, or I'm glad when they are harmed for the other category, the enemies or those we feel distant from, that these attitudes completely irrational, completely inappropriate. Furthermore, consider that quite often the reasons that we feel very, very, very close and want to help another person are often quite shallow. For example, imagine a stranger that you don't know. So just sort of imagine them in front of you. And just imagine that they said, "You look really great today." And then they gave you 20 bucks, right? Yeah, I mean, this person could be Charles Manson. But all of a sudden we're like, wow, I like this person. I really want to help this person. I should do something for this person. Well, they gave me 20 bucks and they said I look like a nice person. Oh, wow. Right? So quite often the reasons that we use to develop this intense feeling of closeness to one category, an intense feeling of distance from another category, and sheer indifference, couldn't give a shit, to the vast majority, are actually quite often very shallow reasons that have something to do with recently this category over here, the ones I like, they did something to help me. Or maybe in the past they did something to help me. Right? And this category or over here, the ones I don't like, they did something to harm me. They looked at me wrong. They took 20 bucks from me. There's a really hilarious video where this is for after retreat. But there's this guy who makes videos out of the comment sections on Facebook and Twitter and stuff. And he found a comment section where this woman was saying that she really hated this woman because she stole her broccoli casserole recipe 8 years ago and said it was hers. And she was going on and on how you shouldn't trust this person. She's horrible. You should really check who your friends are because 8 years ago, she stole her broccoli casserole recipe and said it was hers. Right? And if you look at the reason that you hate and dislike and hold certain people at a distance, you'll find, not always, but quite often, the reasons that we do this are not very sophisticated. There's a thing in the Scottish countryside too, where, and the English countryside and Welsh countryside, where really small towns, they'll say, "Oh, we don't hang out with the McNerneys. Our family don't interact with the McNerneys." Why is that? Well, 3 generations ago, they left the garbage out on a Tuesday. It's like it's a multi-generational hate based upon some tiny faux pas from the other family from years ago. So consider, coming back to a bit more serious attitude, consider that quite often the reasons that you form these feelings of really close. Oh, I'm so close to this person. I want them to do so well. I want their life to go well. The reason we normally do that is quite often very shallow and unstable. It's actually unstable because it's so shallow, isn't it? Because if that person gives me $20, now imagine that person again, right? They gave you $20. Okay, now imagine you walk past them and they said to your wife or girlfriend or something, that person's a piece of shit. Your partner's a piece of shit, right? And now all of a sudden you're going, what, excuse me? What, you know what, buddy? You need to get out of here. Right? Like in a fraction of a second, we can go from you're my best friend, I want the world for you, how can I help you, to I wish you were dead. So both of those reactions are extremely unstable, volatile, and really not that sophisticated or important at the end of the day. So consider again all beings, all these categories, all these beings, pure fundamental mind, infinite spiritual potential, innate desire for happiness, innate desire to be free from meaningless suffering. That's stable all the time. So this attitude you have of equality makes a lot of sense, has a firm foundation in reality, very different than these reactions you have that are subject to change based upon really temporary circumstances. In your next life, your wife might be the person that cuts off your head. Your husband might be the one who did that horrible thing to you 10 years ago that you hate still, right? In your next life, there's a really there's a story from Atisha. So Atisha is one of these great Indian meditators. I'll divert just for a moment, but continue marinating. One of the great Indian meditators, he reestablished Buddhism in Tibet, and he had unbelievable clairvoyance. He could recall past lives and his students' past lives and this sort of thing. And he said, on one occasion, he was observing a family with clairvoyance. And it seemed fairly ordinary. There was a woman sitting alone at a dinner table. I think not alone, maybe her son I think her son and daughter were there. She was there, but her husband had passed away, and the family dog was there, and they were eating a fish dinner. And he went, And so he looked with clairvoyance into their past lives, and what he saw was a mess. This mess, right? So, woman is holding a baby, dog is there, children are there, fish is on the table. He dives into the past lives of each of the beings involved. The husband had died previously and was reborn as the dog, who was now begging for fish, and his wife was kicking the dog. So she was kicking her husband. And previously, the wife had been attacked by someone, and that person had passed away. She had been violently attacked. And that person had so much attachment to the wife. They had been reborn as her child. So she was cradling her enemy in her arms and kicking her husband. And her father spent his whole life fishing in the pond behind the house. And he had so much attachment to fish. He was reborn as a fish. And he was on the table. And so the whole family's eating their grandfather while cradling their enemy and kicking their father. And he said this. He said, "This is samsara. This is suffering, and this is how temporary these relationships are. That seem so profound. You would never, especially Tibetan culture, you'd never, in Asian culture, you'd never hurt your father. You never hurt your grandfather, but he's on the table, and the husband is down low, and they're kicking, and then the enemy is here at the woman's breast." So the normal reasons that we have for being close to one, right? Think about this. Think about this. Even if you don't believe in rebirth, think about this. How temporary these circumstances are. The reasons we have for being close to the Father, but indifferent to the fish. Close to the baby, indifferent to the dog. Right? So temporary. So unstable. On the other hand, the fish, the dog, the baby, the wife, the two children, completely pure mind. Atisha's mind, completely pure mind. Same. Infinite spiritual potential, same. Innate desire for happiness, same. Innate desire to be free from meaningless suffering, same. 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 Right? So let that feeling, same, and all these attitudes I had before, totally irrational. The attitude that they're the same, totally justified. Hold that feeling. Hold. All the infinite beings you like. Pure mind. Infinite potential. Desire for happiness. Desire to be free from meaningless suffering. Same. Same as each other, same as you. All those beings you're indifferent to, couldn't care less how it turns out. Completely pure, fundamental mind. Infinite spiritual potential. Innate desire for happiness. Innate desire to be free from meaningless suffering. Exactly the same as each other and your dear friends and yourself. Same. All of the enemies, all those who have harmed you, all those you don't like. Innate, pure, fundamental mind. Infinite spiritual potential. Infinite spiritual potential. Infinite spiritual potential. Innate desire to be happy in a deep, lasting, satisfying sense. Innate desire to be free from all forms of meaningless suffering, same as each other, same as the strangers, same as your dear ones, same as yourself. Same. The beings in the highest, most pleasurable realms, pure fundamental mind, infinite spiritual potential, innate desire to be free from suffering. Innate desire for happiness, innate desire to be free from suffering, meaningless suffering, exactly the same. Exactly the same. All human beings, exactly the same. All animals, exactly the same. All beings in the spirit realms, exactly the same. All hell beings, exactly the same. Same. And that attitude is rational and justified, stable, based on reality. Okay. Continue marinating during the break on this attitude called equanimity. Same. Each category, same. And it's rational, it's justified. The attitudes we had up until this time in our lives, completely irrational, completely unjustified, completely surface. This, deep, radically well justified, not on the surface at all. Yeah? So marinate. Keep it alive in your system. And last session of the day will be, as before, our marathon session. We'll start with a bit of meditation on the nature of mind, probably. And then we will carry on just refreshing our equanimity. And then we'll go through the rest of the steps and stages of generating metta, compassion, and bodhicitta. Okay? Which is truly is a marathon thing to do in one day. I know someone who spent 4 years trying to generate equanimity, love and kindness, special attitude, compassion, bodhicitta. So with a little luck, we'll do it in 2 hours. Okay, see you after the break. We'll be back at 7 o'clock.